Hello, boys and girls. Welcome to Wednesday's ESPN FC Live. Mark Donaldson, Rhino Hanlon, and soon to be joined by Shaka Hislop. Plenty to talk about today. The Champions League is not one of them. You can just enjoy that later. There's no need for us to preview it. What we're going to do with Ryan to begin with is we're going to look at the managers in the Premier League. Which of their pegs is a little bit shugly? You know what shugly means, Ryan?
I actually don't.
So that's not one that crossed the Atlantic. Yeah, a little bit wobbly. I think it's probably just a Scottish phrase. Who's got a wobbly peg in their locker room, and who's fine? Who's got no issues and doesn't have to worry whatsoever? So when one of the producers at ESPN FC asked you and discussed with you this topic, because you've written a full article about this, how easy was it to kind of grade them and to rank them, all the managers? Because we'll go through them in just a second as to who's under no pressure whatsoever and who really needs to watch out.
Yeah, anytime you do something like this, like coming up with the tiers is a somewhat subjective exercise. But going through it, it actually felt like they all kind of fell into sort of similar categories. Like the top three, we have Pep, Arteta, and Thomas Frank, who are the three longest tenured managers in the league. Probably aren't going to go anywhere unless they want to leave. Then below them, we have Slot, Emery, and Doni Iraola, who are like the guys that are headed for the top tier unless something makes a downturn suddenly. They're going to be sticking around at their clubs, but also they don't have the same leash that those other coaches have. So it actually, going through it all, especially because I wrote this after Ten Hag was fired by United, so United are not part of this list. Because of that, it all kind of, it felt like in a nice way, it all sort of fell pretty into sort of intuitive tiers for me.
It's funny you said I wrote this after 10 Hag. I think it would have been funnier if you'd written it after 10 beers to see what exactly would have happened. Well, before we get to who's where, we now go to live to Trinidad and Tobago, where the clocks are still being adjusted slightly. And it's our very own Shaka Hislop. Hello, Shaq. You need to unmute your mic as well. But apart from that, everything's been fine. Let's see if we... Yes! Now you just need to scooch over a wee bit to get in the shot. Don't worry about this. It's not like we're live.
I'm here.
That's good. Hello, how are you?
And anybody would have thought I never did this before.
No, exactly. You just take your time. It's fine. Good to have you with us. So Ryan's written a piece, basically with tiers of all the managers in the Premier League. Who's going to go first, and who is no harm whatsoever and no worries. So I suppose, Shaq, when we see Ryan's cold list, we're going to go from a cold seat to a hot seat. You've got the likes of Pep. You've got Mikel Arteta. The third one is Thomas Frank at Brentford. Is that fair as far as those three are untouchable? And how proud should Thomas Frank feel that he's part of Ryan's list at that stage?
Well, everybody's dying to get on one of Ryan's lists. That's for starters. So Thomas Frank is very, very rare indeed. Listen, I heard Ryan's explanation here about the tenure of the top three who are on that cold list, and that makes total sense. Of course, again, managers under shorter tenure on the slot, particularly given the season that they've started, he is banging down that door, as is Unai Emery, who continues to simply amaze at Aston Villa. But you know, that being said, the top three are there for a reason, and I know we will get to discussions later about at the very least Mikel Arteta on that list, and just kind of where Arsenal are given their spending, given what the expectations may be. There's still a lot of speculation about Pep Guardiola and his future, but then again, to Rand's point, Pep Guardiola steps down when he's ready to step down. I don't think any club in their right mind dismisses him, especially. And yes, I know we're just a few hours removed from a hiding against Sporting, but still, Pep Guardiola is the most sought after manager in the game if he were to become available.
Okay, so those are the three in the kind of the lowest tier. There are 7 tiers, okay? We've got cold, still cool, kind of cool, less cool, lukewarm, getting hot, and when, not if. So we've just spoken about a manager of a team that's 12th in the table, Ryan, Thomas Frank. I thought, oh, well, surely Nuno, whose Forest side's absolutely flying right now and find themselves third in the table, they'll be in the next tier down. No. They'll be in the next tier after that. No. They're in the less cool tier, which is the kind of 4th tier. Why do you have the manager of a side who are third right now way, way below someone whose team is 12th in the table in Thomas Frank?
I think with doing this, part of it is you're taking into account the situation of the club that they work out, their history with the club. Thomas Frank, like we know Brentford sort of approach the sport a little bit differently, very analytically driven. They know that Thomas Frank will sort of abide by a lot of the analytical principles, and he's been doing it for almost 7 years. And I think for the amount of money that Brentford spends, 12th is actually fantastic, given their wage bill is closer to a bottom 3 in the league. Forest, I think Nuno's done fantastic this year, but also like they were in a relegation battle less than a year ago. Also, I view Nottingham Forest as one of the more chaotic clubs in the league, given that they seemingly sign 80 players every transfer window. And I think I might be going out on a limb here, but I don't think Forest are the 3rd best team in the league. I think they will probably drop down a little bit as the season goes on. So if you see a kind of sudden downturn at Forest, I think there's much more of a risk of someone getting trigger happy at that club than Thomas Frank finishing, 15th with Brentford.
True. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and chuck a wee grenade in there and see what happens. But no, that's a decent answer. Shaka, is there one manager in the Premier League, and then we can find out where that manager is in Ryan's list, that maybe should be safer than other people think, or maybe should be a little bit more worried than people think about his job?
Well, I mentioned a couple off the top, Arne Slot, and who, again, brand new manager, albeit, but given the start that Liverpool have made to this season, as I described, would be banging down that door as is Unai Emery. Apart from that, I think everything, and to Ryan's point, we are still early in the season, and everything just seems so fragile sometimes that we know 3 or 4 bad results could see you going from knocking on one of the European places to being in a relegation dogfight. That's just simply how it is. I'll be honest with Sean Dyche, and I can't remember exactly where he fell in Ryan's list. Sean Dyche is one, and that is I am amazed that he's still at Everton, kind of given their struggles over the last couple of seasons, and you just wonder how much longer that will continue.
Dyche is one of 5 in the getting hot, second from bottom.
Oh, it's hot. It's
category.
Hot.
Well, I'm going to get to
I'm
going to get to the 2 that are hot in just a second, because I disagree with one of them. So, as well as Dyche, Ryan, you've got Eddie Howe at Newcastle. Shaka shudders. And then you've got Lopetegui, you've got Glasner at Palace, and you've got Cooper at Leicester. How did you go about putting them into these tiers? Because someone like Eddie Howe and what he has to do with Newcastle is very different from what someone like Steve Cooper has to do at Leicester, because one of them has to keep the team in the league and the other has to try and improve on last season, but you've got them in the same tier.
Yeah, well, I think it's kind of like what I said with Thomas Frank, right? Like if we just look at the standings, why would Thomas Frank be in the top 3 of safest jobs? But you have to compare the sort of expectations at the club and what the manager is being held up to. I think Eddie Howe, you could look at Newcastle and be like, they just beat Arsenal. They're right middle of the table. Like, why is his job potentially at risk in the same way that Steve Cooper's is, whose team is only a few points ahead of the relegation zone? But I think Newcastle, I mean, we don't need to get into a huge Newcastle conversation here, but, it seemed like the plan for Newcastle was to build them into one of the best clubs in the world. And then they finished top 4. They started off pretty well last season, were fantastic in the Champions League at the beginning. And then now they're just like a mid-table team, despite having arguably the richest owners in the sport. There's been some public spats between Paul Mitchell, the sporting director, and Eddie Howe. So to me, given the expectations for Newcastle and the resources there, like just being mid-table doesn't seem like it's going to buy you that much more time. So to me, that sort of performance is roughly equivalent to Steve Cooper, who the team is out of the relegation zone, but also if you look at the betting odds, they're still one of the favorites to go down, greater than 50%, and a couple poor results. And it feels like his job will be at risk too. So I guess with both of them, one bad month, and you could see both of them being at risk of being out of work.
Okay, final two, and it's the hot ones. It's the ones that don't really want to kind of buy houses, maybe best to rent right now because their jobs, they're under a bit of pressure. It's no surprise, Shaka, that Ryan's two are the two teams at the bottom of the table. Now, Wolves for me are an interesting one because I went back and it's the end of April when they beat Luton by 2-1. That was their last Premier League win. However, their schedule to begin the season has been dreadful. They faced all the top sides. And now the schedule gets easier, right? So it's the bottom two that meet each other. I'm all on you this weekend, Wolves against Southampton. Then Wolves have got Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, Wolverhampton, then go to West Ham. They've got Ipswich at home and Leicester away. That's a good run of form, isn't it? So are you more in the Gary O'Neill should be okay camp than the Russell Martin, oh dear, what's next for Southampton camp?
I'm concerned for Gary O'Neill. Listen, Fulham, I think will prove a tough test. They've proven themselves to be a good team this season. But while yes, you look at those run of games and say Wolves could really put together a run here and climb the table. The other side to that very coin is they don't get great results, and there's nowhere to turn. There's absolutely nowhere to hide. The only reason I think Gary O'Neill is still in the job is because of how difficult the start of the season has been. But any kind of leeway, any kind of wiggle room has been exhausted. So now you've got to get good results from here on in. Dare I say, including against Fulham. I'll probably say Fulham a draw if you win the others. Keeps you in the job and probably sees Gary O'Neill through to the end of the season. But like I said, that's a very big if, because anything goes the other way, and there's simply nowhere to hide for Gary O'Neill.
And just to wrap this one up, Ryan, Wolves have scored twice as many goals as Southampton. They've got 14. Southampton have only got 7. Wolves have also conceded more than anybody else in the league. So it's pretty clear where the struggles are there. For Southampton, they just need to score goals. They've not been able to do so. Is it now the case for you that Russell Martin might be a defeat or two away from being really under pressure? Or is it unfair on these managers of teams that get promoted to expect them to be at the same level as teams from 17 upwards in the Premier League? Should Russell Martin get a little bit more leeway?
Yeah, taking behind the curtain a little bit here. I started working on this piece before this weekend, and I had Russell Martin won, and then Southampton won a game, which I think bought him a little bit of leeway, given that Wolves still haven't won a game this year. I think with Russell Martin, the question is, like, it's sort of the Burnley question from last year. It's like this team is trying to play like Manchester City. If you look at any of the stats of like how slow they move the ball upfield, the percentage of their passes that are forward, they're basically second like least aggressive team after Manchester City. But like you said, it's not generating any kind of attack, and they're a pretty bad defensive team as well. So I think you look at that in two ways. In one way, it's like he sort of looks like this ideologue who's trying to like get his style across rather than trying to like maximize the number of points that Southampton's winning. But at the same time, Southampton are aware that he is doing this, and it seems like maybe the club want him to sort of try to implement this more aggressive possession style. They know it probably isn't going to work out, but maybe you're doing the thing where what Norwich used to say, where they were like, we want to be one of the 22 best teams. If we get relegated, we'll get promoted again. We'll be stronger the next time we come up. So you can look at it one of two ways. But I think like going forward, I think other than maybe Ipswich, I think Southampton are just the worst team in the league, like projecting forward. And I think because of the way they play, they're just due for some really horrible looking losses. So I think like they didn't play particularly well against Everton, in my opinion. They sort of got dominated, but nicked the result. So that bought him a little bit of time. But yeah, I think Russell Martin, if they play how they've been playing, the results are going to revert very quickly. And, it's like a question of, do you want to just stick to this style and get relegated, or do you want to bring someone else in who's going to try to grind out some points and keep you up potentially?
Sam Allardyce. No, just kidding.
Not
Before we say goodbye to you, and thank you for joining us today, Ryan, it is a good article you've written. Where can people find it?
It is on ESPN.com/soccer, I believe, is the URL. And you need an ESPN Plus subscription to read that. So subscribe to ESPN Plus.
There you go. Thank you, Ryan. Enjoy your week. We'll speak to you again soon. Shaka, you ready for some fact or fiction?
Well, why not?
Okay. So we've got a whole list of questions or statements, and you have to say whether you agree with them or disagree with them. Okay, so we're going to start with Real Madrid. And look, I'm going to, in all clarity, this was not part of the original email that we got sent. But then when you lose like you did yesterday against AC Milan at home in the Champions League, and you've won 15 of them, it goes straight to the top of the pile. Is it time to panic for Real Madrid and Carlo Ancelotti?
No, because Real Madrid and Carlo Ancelotti have been here before, and they've been able to turn it around. Listen, I always felt it would be a difficult settling in period for Kylian Mbappe. At least that every time we discuss Kylian Mbappe's move to Real Madrid, the question always kind of swirled around: where would he fit? What does Vinicius do? If Vinicius stays on the left, what does Kylian Mbappe do? What about Rodrigo? The truth is, though, while we questioned that, we thought Carlo Ancelotti would get it right sooner or later. It's proving a little bit later than certainly I expected. But that doesn't change the fact that Carlo Ancelotti is an incredible manager, and you think he will turn this around. Now, whether it's in time to eclipse Barcelona and what they're doing under Hansi Flick, whether it'll be in time for the knockout stages of the Champions League, this is freely assuming that they get through these group stages. Do you call it the group stages now?
The league stage. The league stage. The
league stage. Okay, there you go. Freely assuming they get through the league stage. Then all of a sudden, this is when Real Madrid come really good
they come alive,
knockout stages. It happens. Listen, we're only a few. Okay, I was about to say we were only a few years removed, but albeit a few years with a Cristiano Ronaldo from Real Madrid finishing second in the group stage. I can't remember exactly what year it was, and going on and winning the whole thing. Granted, Cristiano Ronaldo was a part of that Real Madrid, so Real have seen crises before and come through them seemingly unscathed at times in the same season.
Liverpool coming up in the Champions League as well. Fact or fiction number 2. Chelsea will win the Premier League before Arsenal.
I fiction for me. I still have Arsenal as favourites, for some very strange reason. And I know Chelsea and Arsenal face off against each other this weekend. If things don't go Arsenal's way, all of a sudden there's a 10-point gap to the top or whatever it is. And the way Liverpool are playing right now, that just feels insurmountable. But I chose Arsenal to win the title at the start of the season. I am stubbornly sticking with them for right now. So therefore, by default, I say Arsenal wins a title before Chelsea.
Fact or fiction, Shaka? Neymar will go down as one of the biggest what-ifs in his generation.
That's an absolute fact. I don't think world football had seen a talent quite like Neymar's. Probably since in terms of pure talent, since Ronaldinho. And while people kind of say the same about Ronaldinho, He won it all, including the Ballon d'Or. And Neymar has not. Neymar has got a Spanish title, a French title, Champions League, albeit, but didn't get the individual award that he so desperately wanted when he moved to PSG. Brazil's World Cups have been one disappointment after the next. And invariably, post-Barcelona, there is nothing to really write home about in terms of accomplishments, individual or team, outside of winning consistently in France. For Neymar, and yes, for, again, one of the brightest, pure talents that the game has seen, that's disappointing.
Next, Ruben Amorim will not win the Premier League title during his spell at Old Trafford. Agree or disagree?
I think there are a lot of factors to this. I'm going to say disagree. And I say that because there is just so much uncertainty about everybody else. And let me quantify that. Manchester United are still a very big club. We can question how well they run, but they're a big football club, and they will have money to spend on players. At the same time, we're talking about a Pep Guardiola who may very well be, and I'm just throwing this out there, but it's a distinct possibility, maybe in the last year of his time at Manchester City. We've got a Mikel Arteta who keeps hitting the post with Arsenal. Again, I know I picked them to win the title this season, and I'm standing by that. But if they don't, how does that change perceptions around Arteta, who spent very heavily at Arsenal? And as I mentioned, Arne Slot, wow, what he's been able to achieve has been simply outstanding. I don't think anybody expected it. Do Liverpool regress to the mean post Mo Salah? There's just so much questions about it. The one thing we know is Amorim has shown himself to be a good manager at Sporting, at the very least. Even that needs a little bit of background. And that Manchester United continue to be a big football club. So I am going to say that at some point, given time, Amorim gets it right.
You've just said the phrase regressed to the mean. Is that the first time you've used that since you were studying at Quinnipiac or some of the various places that you studied? And does it come from one of those textbooks behind you?
No, not at all, Mark. I regress to the mean all the time. That's
just haven't not heard it on FC forever.
That's my life philosophy.
Okay.
So,
okay. Yeah. These next two are a simple yes or no, please. Lionel Messi will lead Inter Miami to an MLS Cup.
Yes.
Okay. Doesn't even say which year, so he might have Neymar for help
year. You told me it was a yes or no. I'm just following.
I know that was a follow-up. Yeah, good. At least you're the only one that listens. You're the best behaved on here. The other one, Vinny Jr. will bounce back and win the Ballon d'Or next year. Yes.
No.
Follow-up question, sir. Who will?
Oh goodness, that is a really good question. I tell you what. Right now, I think you've got to start looking at Mo Salah. Mo Salah has put up numbers in years gone by that, but for a Ronaldo or a Lionel Messi, or quite easily could have won the Ballon d'Or. Given everybody else kind of feelings and who Liverpool have shown themselves to be so far this season, I'm kind of thinking Mo Salah is in with a show. Outside of that, Robert Lewandowski. So it's a kind of head-to-head Liverpool-Barcelona, who both have exceeded all expectations. If one of those two teams goes on to win it all domestically and in Europe, I think it comes down to a head-to-head between Mo Salah and Robert Lewandowski, seeing that Rafinha, Lamine Yamal may have something to say about that.
I'm sorry. Vote Brian and Boomo. That's the correct answer. Here's another yes or no. So every member of the Newcastle first team squad gets to take a penalty against Shaka Hislop. Do you save one? That's all you need to do. Do you save one penalty from all the penalties you would have to face against the Newcastle United first team squad right now?
I back myself to save one. At least I back myself for somebody to kick over bars at the very least. They're not all going to score.
They can't. Yeah.
They can't.
Putting it over the bar doesn't count as a save. So they'd all have
Why
to.
not?
Because you don't save the thing. It doesn't go down as a penalty save. It goes down as a penalty miss. Don't start me on that now. Agree or
counts as a save.
It doesn't count. You've got to use your hands. That's what these things are for. If that's a save.
Counts as a save.
Don't, honestly, you and your union.
I'm claiming it.
Stop it. Behave yourself. Stop. I told you were the best behaved. Now you're the worst behaved. Let's not go there. Next, agree or disagree that Xabi Alonso is regretting his decision to stay at Bayer Leverkusen?
No, he's not. He's learning. He's learning. He's learning his trade. This is a part of the job. This absolutely is a part of the job. No question. He was easily the most sought after manager in the summer before deciding to stay at Leverkusen. But I don't think he's regretting it at all. And I think when he decides to leave Bayer Leverkusen, there'll be no shortage of suitors. I don't think he regrets it at all.
Let's end with 3 yes or no's. Number 1, Jose Mourinho will manage in the Premier League again before the end of his career.
No.
Wow. That wasn't just a no, it was a capital letters with 3 exclamation marks following it. Mario Balotelli is a top 5 Italian striker of the last 20 years.
Last 20?
That's a good question.
The last, man. I'll be honest. I'm struggling to name 4 more. Italy have been so bad over the last 10 years. Haven't qualified for the last 2 World Cups. Good and won the Euros with Ciro Immobile as their striker. I'm going to say he's, without question, one of the most talented strikers Italy has produced. Whether that has translated to performances, particularly for the national team, I'm not so sure.
Okay, and we will end this segment with a simple yes or no. Barcelona will win La Liga this year.
Yes.
Okay. Finally, it's a big one this weekend. Chelsea against Arsenal. We'll talk more about this game on Friday in ESPN FC Live. So I don't think you're with us on Friday. I want to get your prediction for the game at Stamford Bridge. What do you reckon this weekend?
Listen, I think, maybe Chelsea have exceeded expectations under Maresca, who's just somehow getting this right. And Arsenal are dealing with injuries and haven't looked themselves over recent weeks. I think they get this right. But just. I am going to go 1-0 Arsenal.
Clean sheet against a side that can score goals. Cole Palmer.
I think
and his fitness is an interesting one.
I think they regress to their own mean of being rather selfish defensively.
Twice.
And then they get one. They get one.
Okay. Thank you for your company.
I just have to say
that's okay. You can use it as often as you want here.
Really makes sense there.
No, it didn't. But I'm letting you away with that. Just don't use it. Don't use it on nightly on ESPN FC because they wouldn't even know what that meant. But that's between you and I. Okay. Just give them one of those textbooks behind you and those 2 people that are
all right
doing what they're doing in your bookcase. Thank you. Even though you were late. Appreciate your time. Don't be late again. We will see you on the next.
These clocks, I can't see. I'm from Trinidad. Our clocks don't turn back. I've been confused for the last 3 days.
You finished? Bye, boys and girls.